This week on The Watchman, we're back on the Israel-Lebanon border for part 2 of our special series on the growing Hezbollah threat. Learn how this terrorist army could spark a future Middle East war.
What Iran would like to do is take this Hezbollah front, add it to a Syrian front on the Golan side, and then have Israel, at least in the north, in a vice between the two sides, and force Israel, if necessary, to fight a two-front war.
Plus, they come from around the world to help defend the Jewish state. See how these Israeli lone soldiers are thriving in their ancient homeland despite big challenges. It's The Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel only on TBN. And welcome to The Watchman. We're going to get right into it this week and head back to the Israel-Lebanon border for part 2 of our interview with military and strategic analyst Elliot Chodoff. Now, if you missed part 1 last week, Elliot broke down the Hezbollah threat to Israel and the region, the rockets, the missiles, the foot soldiers, and the terror tunnels, all backed by Iran. Elliot is a veteran of the Israel Defense Forces and still serves today as a major in the IDF reserves. He shares with us why Hezbollah is not just the world's most dangerous terrorist organization, they are a terrorist army that the entire world needs to be concerned about. Let's head back to Israel's border with southern Lebanon, Hezbollah country, with Elliot Chodoff. They have made noise, including the current leader of Hezbollah, who you mentioned, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah. They've made noise about in the next war against Israel, they're going to conquer where we're standing right now, right? Northern Israel, villages here.
Not so much here, but there.
Okay, Kiryat Shimona, more in that area, Metula.
They have a number, call it around dozen for our purposes, of assault companies, called Rejwan, that's the organization, along this border, assault companies whose mission is to attack, ground attack against Israel. And anybody who knows anything about ground combat knows a company in the assault will take some ground. Yeah. And we have villages whose northern fence is the border. Touches Lebanon. So you have a mini Hezbollah invasion there. Right. And Elliot, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a master strategist when it comes to the military. If Hezbollah, say they come over the border, they plant the Hezbollah flag for even an hour and they hold the village, the IDF wipes them out, but that image of the Hezbollah flag on Israeli territory beams worldwide, victory. Yes. Propaganda, coup. That's right. Victory in the type of war that we're talking about here, which is insurgency, counterinsurgency. Yep. And I was going to say, if an infantry in regular combat, if an infantry company took a village and was then wiped out, that would be considered a defeat. If Hezbollah takes a village and is then wiped out, it's a victory. So it's a whole different way of fighting war on the ground. It's something that's been evolving now for decades. Modern armies are only getting used to it over the past 20 years, but this is more than half a century that we've been seeing this type of war.
Stakes are high. And by the way, those thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of rockets you described, how did they get here into southern Lebanon?
Well, you know, there's a myth that they're smuggling them into Lebanon, but it's a myth because smuggling implies clandestine. Yeah. They're shipping them in.
Iran.
The Iranians overland, they're flying them into Damascus, into Beirut. They're using civilian airliners. We're interdicting what we can.
Yeah, the Israelis are, yeah.
We take out convoys.
In Syria frequently, yeah. You know, it's interesting. That seems to be a good reason why Iran is so invested in Syria, Elliot,
Absolutely.
because, hey, if you're transiting rockets through Damascus down to here to Lebanon, you got to hold Damascus.
This is their bridge.
That's their bridge.
Right.
And the goal is to surround Israel on all sides and squeeze it.
On that level, yes. Also to hold the Mediterranean coast.
The land corridor.
Right. But certainly what Iran would like to do is take this Hezbollah front, add it to a Syrian front on the Golan side, and then have Israel, at least in the north, in a vice between the two sides. And force Israel, if necessary, to fight a two-front war.
And maybe even a third front, I guess, if Hamas decide to act up in Gaza. And
Look, there's no great secret here, and I don't give away military secrets.
you've got a few.
Just one or two. It's no secret. The solution to Hezbollah will be on the ground. In 2006, we used to talk about we're going to create the consciousness of victory, the image of victory, win the war of consciousness. Now we're talking about eradicating, erasing, destroying, defeating.
Defeating Hezbollah once and for all in the next go-round, yeah. On the ground,
On the ground.
not just from the air.
The air can't do it.
It's got to be a ground incursion. Yeah, and you were involved, the 06 war, hey, you were here.
I was here.
You played a major role up here.
I'm still here.
Yeah, yes you are.
I serve in Northern Command.
Yeah.
The war in 06 was unexpected by them. They launched an attack, and they figured Israel was going to roll over and play dead. And Nasrallah said outright after the war, if I had known that would have been the response, I wouldn't have done it. Okay, now you know. All right?
They took heavy losses in 06.
Oh, they did. They did.
And he's been in a bunker someplace ever sinst.
The Iranians made that mistake in May. They decided to teach us a lesson, if you will, and they fired some rockets at us, a grand total of 32, 28 of which missed the country, and 4 were intercepted. But we correctly treated an attack, failed or successful, as an attack, and the Air Force went to work on them in the largest air operation that we've launched in decades.
Last question here, as we wrap up from the Israel-Lebanon border. Number one, can Iron Dome play a major role in counteracting that massive Hezbollah rocket stockpile? And number two, dovetailing on that, what's next?
The answer to the first question is an emphatic no, because when they're capable of launching as many high-quality rockets as they are today, meaning dozens simultaneously at a single target, Iron Dome is swamped. In other words, it's not that the technology can't handle it, it's the firepower can't handle it.
Just too many rockets, 2,000 today.
Right, and let's say dozens at once on Haifa, for example.
There's only so many Iron Dome batteries.
That can fire in a 30-second flight time or a 45-second flight time. Okay, these are the sort of the parameters that mean that Iron Dome is not going to be effective. It'll do some and it'll take some, but it's not. Iron Dome wasn't designed for this. Iron Dome was designed for the Gaza kind of a situation. 12 rockets are fired, 8 of them aren't going to hit the target anyway, and Iron Dome intercepts the other 4. At this point, we have 2 almost opposite possibilities. The likely one, or let's say the more natural one for the Iranians, is to slowly build up in Syria, trying not to trigger our responses until they reach a point where they can launch what they want to launch. Militating against that, and I have no idea how much impact this has, is the age of the Supreme Leader Khamenei and his health. Because it's possible that if he feels that he's on his way out, he may decide to push forward faster against the natural tendencies, but to say, I want to see the end of this.
Yeah, and he is elderly right now. Yeah.
That's something that I don't think can be sort of built into a prediction. It's just something you have to say it's there as one of the factors. I don't see something in the immediate, but the immediate in this country is the next 2 to 3 hours.
Like you've said before, Elliot, these are not guys in caves.
No.
These are smart, strategic,
educated chess players, yes.
And they're not going to show their hand, number one. They're not going to play their best hand.
Without having the rest of the game
already mapped out. Yes. Elliot, thanks for mapping it out for us, my friend. It was great. We'll do it again soon here. Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it, my friend. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks again to Elliot Chodoff for that great analysis of the Hezbollah threat these past 2 weeks. They don't come any better. Well, up next, you've heard about the threats Now meet some of the IDF soldiers who are on the front lines against them, thousands of miles from home. Learn more about these lone soldiers after the break. Don't move. Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. I want you to join me in Washington, D.C. this July for the premier pro-Israel event in the United States. The 14th annual CUFI Washington Summit will be held on July 7th, 8th, and 9th at the D.C. Convention Center, and it will be our biggest and best yet. Thousands of pro-Israel Christians will join together and lift their voices in the nation's capital for Zion's sake. CUFI's founder and chairman, the one and only Pastor John Hagee, will be there. He'll be joined by the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, and many other very special guests. But most importantly, attending CUFI's Washington Summit gives you the chance to personally deliver a strong pro-Israel message to your members of Congress. I'll be in D.C. this summer, and I hope you'll be there too to raise your voice for Israel for such a time as this. And welcome back. Imagine leaving everything behind, family, friends, and the comforts of home, and resettling in a distant land where you'll fight a host of dangerous enemies. That's exactly what many young Jewish men and women from around the world do each year when they move to Israel to help defend the Jewish state as members of the Israel Defense Forces. Thankfully, one organization in Jerusalem is making these lone soldiers feel right at home. And since Israel is the ancient and ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, it's a natural fit. Take a look. Well, Josh, this is an amazing place, the Lone Soldier Center here in Jerusalem. First of all, for people at home who might not know, what is a lone soldier here in Israel? You have almost 7,000 lone soldiers right here in Israel. What does that mean?
So a lone soldier, it's a classification that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, created for a young man primarily, and also young women who serve here in the IDF and don't have family to support them throughout their army service. A little more complicated than the US situation, or for most militaries that might project force abroad. The Israeli army operates just down the block, sadly, from a lot of Israeli cities. Yeah. Therefore, soldiers are given leave just about every weekend, if not every other weekend, to go home and relax, recharge their batteries, get a good night's sleep, get some food.
Parents do their laundry, all that good stuff.
They go home for some R&R and for some tender love and care as well. Yeah. With their mom and dad and their brothers, sisters, everyone who raised them is there for them on weekends to help them kind of decharge their batteries, get ready to go again. Yeah. Works amazingly well for most of the Israeli army, but then you have this subset of people who come from around the world, young Jewish people who want to come and protect Israel, protect the Jewish homelands, and they don't have family here. They're referred to, therefore, by the army as lone soldiers because they don't have that family support, that safety net to fall back on, of a place to eat, a place to sleep, a place to...
They might have come from America, Europe, South America.
We have lone soldiers from over 51 countries who are serving right now. Basically, any Jewish community, large or small, we'll have some young people that really care about Israel, that watch the news, see when Israel gets not just bashed, but attacked, when Jewish life is risked here on the streets of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, all of our cities. So there's young people who care about Israel and will come here to help do their small part to defend it.
Josh, that brings us to the Lone Soldier Center and what you're doing here. Now, a very good friend of yours, Michael Levin, was a lone soldier. He was kind of the inspiration for this place. Tell us a bit about Michael's story and how he spurred you on to start the Lone Soldier Center.
So Michael was also a lone soldier like me, drafted about a year and change before I went into the army. He grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, came to Israel and drafted into the paratroopers. And Michael lived down the block from here, across from Zion Square, had an apartment with 4 other lone soldiers. And Michael was the word in Hebrew is chevreman, like a man of the people, a people's person.
Yeah, everyone loved him.
Everyone loved him. Had a giant circle of friends that I was lucky, and a group of us were lucky enough to be part of his life, and he would always bring us in. make sure we got out of the army. Oh, you got a place to eat? Come on by my place. I'm making wings, I'm making sausages, I'm making whatever. He would involve everyone in his life and was kind of the nucleus that a lot of the informal lone soldier community evolved to a big degree around him. So when Michael fell fighting, sadly, in the summer of 2006 in the Second Lebanon War, after he was killed, fast forward a year and a bit, a group of us who served with Michael, some guys who lived with Michael, we realized that we needed to do something to keep Michael's name and memory and his actions alive, and to also deal with an issue that a bunch of us ran into throughout our service as lone soldiers. How do we make life, the transition into the Army, the transition out of the Army, how do we make it a little bit easier for these amazing young people coming from around the world? So we started off, a group of us volunteering, didn't found the charity originally, didn't have a business plan, didn't have a motto or anything. We just spent a year plus just volunteering, giving advice, giving help, giving counseling to the young people, young men and women coming as lone soldiers from around the world. And over time, we were lucky to grow it and to put down real physical structures, provide meals. We bring together everything you see here in this, it's a moadon in Hebrew, in the clubhouse here.
It's the clubhouse, man. It's great. It's a laid-back feeling.
You guys are coming back on Friday, but you'll see it's full of life and lots of soldiers coming in.
There's a big Shabbat meal here, right?
Everything here is, the Army word, at least in Hebrew, is modular. You can move, everything gets picked up, moved out of here, goes into the office space. On Shabbat, so we can have a Friday night dinner here.
And there'll be dozens of people here on the holidays too?
On holidays, it's well over 100 come through. Friday night dinners, well over 100 guys here in Jerusalem. Similar facility in Tel Aviv, and then we have houses.
All lone soldiers?
Yep.
Talk a bit more, if you can, about what motivates a lone soldier to leave everything behind, leave family, and come here to Israel, serve in the IDF.
A desire to protect Jewish life, to protect the Jewish homeland. I think just to do their part, to kind of give Israel a big hug and to do whatever they can to keep Israelis safe, to keep the Jews here inside of Israel safe. I think that's one of the primary, if not the primary factor for a lot of the young people coming. And also the historical memory that all people have. Jews have a very profound historical memory. We have fast days throughout the year for what happens with the Romans, what happened with the Greeks 2,000-3,000 years ago, we still remember. So to be 70-something years removed from the Holocaust and removed from the horrors that happen when you're a people without a flag, without an army, without a homeland, without the ability to defend yourself, your women, your children, your way of life. So I think now that we have that privilege and that responsibility, myself personally and a lot of the lone soldiers that come, they feel that they owe it to their people, they owe it to the people who came before them, that kept alive our traditions, our heritage, our religion, our peoplehood. That if we have a state, they need to do their small part or their big part to keep that nation safe.
Josh, you're filling such a crucial need there. Thank you so much for having us here at the Lone Soldier Center. Keep it up. You guys are doing great work.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Josh. Up next, we hear from lone soldiers from around the world who share why they joined the Israel Defense Forces and how the Lone Soldier Center has filled a crucial need in their lives. Stick around.
Israel faces growing threats on all sides. Hezbollah, ISIS, Iran, and Hamas never cease their attacks. But God has raised CUFI up at this moment in history to stand between Israel and those who seek to destroy the Jewish state.
Israel's enemies are on the move. As dark clouds gather on the horizon, tell the world you proudly stand with Israel. Be a courageous voice for biblical unity and moral clarity when you join Christians United for Israel. Show your love for the people of Zion with this beautiful symbol of unending support for Israel.
Wear the pen and join CUFI, a movement of over 5 million defenders of Israel. Call the number on your screen or visit cufi.org/pen to receive your pin that will show your proud support for the special bond between Israel and America.
All my life, I've been coming to Israel to visit family, but I really felt like a tourist. So it was really a huge jump to come here and actually make Aliyah and live here as an Israeli.
Every Israeli, 90% of the population was in the army. So I don't want to be one of those, I don't want to be an American living in Israel. I want to be an Israeli. I want to be part of the community. To do that, I'll have to do what everyone else does by becoming a soldier first.
I still don't speak Hebrew amazingly. I speak it decent, but it's not the best. When I first went into combat training, I had no idea what was going on for about the first 4 months. They said run, I said okay, I just ran, just kept running sometimes. They'd be like, where are you going? I'm like, you said that way. They're like, no, we said stop here, but I just kept running. It's best to overdo than underdo, I guess.
When I came, I was really, really clueless. And when I finally found the Lone Soldier Center, it was completely by accident. I was just, I went on Facebook and looked up Lone Soldiers and was messaging a bunch of random people, and they're like, come here. And I was really welcomed into the community. I started coming to their Friday night dinners. It was very different. I finally felt like life was moving here. They helped me kind of get accustomed into Israeli society.
I went to a public school during high school, and like most of my friends aren't Jewish, so they don't really understand. They kind of make fun of like Israel a little bit because they don't understand. They're in that American university atmosphere, and it's just different. It's just a different world.
I'm in the 188th Brigade, where we're mostly up north in the Golan, next to Syria, next to Lebanon. Right now I'm doing Imun, which is training, get us prepared for whatever happens. If anything, every couple of months we have a training, so we remember what we need to do in case of something. In a couple of weeks, I'm getting sent to the border of Lebanon.
I take care of dogs in the Air Force. They had us take a first aid course, and I really want to be a veterinarian and work with dogs after the Army, so I was really happy when I got that job. Our dogs, there's about 40 of them. It's on a secret base, and they guard the base, and so I'm there to take care of them. I know every single dog, like everything about every dog. I love it.
You can work out a lot, you can be in fantastic shape, but it's very different than being in shape for the Army. There's very specific Army terms that we learn there. There's very specific, like carrying a stretcher. This is very important in the Army. You do it a lot. They teach you how to carry a stretcher properly with a lot of weight on it. They teach you how to put people on the stretcher. They teach you what to do. Signs of someone has a heat stroke even, which are very important. And I'm Canadian. People don't really get heat strokes in Canada. In Israel, it's very common. Very important to know the signs. I decided to come here and kind of, I suppose, put my life into perspective. And I definitely did that. I looked at all the units I could possibly want, from intelligence to combat positions, and I decided that I wanted something difficult and that I was going to strive for it. So I think this has really helped mature me and change me in amazing ways.
Folks, it was great spending time with those brave Israeli lone soldiers. They are an inspiration. Well, up next, Israeli and American leaders have made clear that they understand the danger posed by the Iranian regime and its proxy Hezbollah. Yet some European leaders still don't seem convinced. Some final thoughts on that after the break. Don't move.
Every year, the Christians United for Israel Washington Summit gets bigger, better, and more powerful.
I have faith that with God's help, and with the men and women gathered here, with all those who cherish Israel, and with President Donald Trump in the White House, the best days for Israel and for America together are yet to come.
What's amazing about Christians United for Israel is not just the power of your voice, it's also the importance of the cause you have dedicated your voice to. Standing up against this global pressure campaign on Israel and the Jewish people goes to the heart of our friendship and the heart of America. And the tip of the spear is Christians United for Israel.
Join Pastor Hagee and top leaders from Israel and America this July for the 2019 CUFI Washington Summit. Register now at www.cufi.org/summit.
And welcome back. We told you these past 2 weeks about the growing Hezbollah threat to Israel's north. But remember, Hezbollah doesn't do anything without the approval of its Iranian master. Iran is the head of the snake when it comes to global terror and a major threat to world peace. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear that he realizes this, and so has President Trump. European leaders, however, have taken a much softer stance towards Iran's mullahs and seem desperate to keep that disastrous Iran nuclear deal alive, even after President Trump pulled the U.S. out of it. We talked to Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of all British forces in Afghanistan, to get his take on Europe's appeasement mindset towards the Iranian regime. Take a look.
Europe is expert at appeasement, and they're not just appeasing Iran, they're appeasing so many of our other enemies around the world. It's a habit, and partly it derives from the weakness, not necessarily the military weakness, but the weakness of the politicians in lacking the will to confront the threats that face them. And that is the biggest problem I think we face. And many Americans say to me, but surely Britain stood up against the Nazis in the 1930s, the only country that really did. And you weren't appeasers, but actually that's not strictly true. The reality is that one man stood up against the Nazis, and that was Winston Churchill, and today we don't have a Winston Churchill.
First Chronicles tells us about the men of Issachar, 200 leaders who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. Colonel Kemp and Elliot Chodoff are modern-day men of Issachar, and we're proud to call them great friends of Christians United for Israel. Well, thanks for joining us this week here on The Watchman. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.